Champagne glasses still sit on the nightstand, wedding flowers wilting in their vase, and a marriage certificate dated just 24 hours earlier lies soaked in blood. In Millersburg, Ohio, what should have been the beginning of forever became the scene of unthinkable horror. He thought he knew everything about the woman he'd just married, her laugh, her dreams, her past. But when the lights went out on their wedding night, a shocking discovery would turn their honeymoon suite into a crime scene that would grip the nation. What secret was she hiding that would cost her everything? Welcome to True Crime Journal HQ. Thanks to all our viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with us for daily update on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Before we start, if you want to learn how to protect yourself from potential danger, then download your free ebook titled Safety for Women Over 40 Everyday Habits to Outsmart Criminals by clicking the link in the pinned comment. Darren Whitfield was the kind of man who blended into crowds. At 30, he'd spent the last 5 years working logistics for Midwest Transport, a regional trucking company that hauled everything from auto parts to grain across Ohio's flat highways. His co-workers knew him as reliable, but quiet, the guy who ate lunch alone while reading paperbacks, who never joined the Friday night drinks at Murphy's Tavern. His apartment on Elm Street reflected his solitary life, a worn leather couch, stacks of books on philosophy and history, and a computer desk where he spent most evenings. The recent breakup with Jessica had hit harder than he'd expected. 3 years together, and she'd left him for someone more ambitious, more exciting. The words still stung months later. That's when Darren discovered the Classical Literature Forum, an online community where people discussed everything from Dickens to Dostoevsky. It became his refuge, a place where his knowledge mattered, where thoughtful responses earned respect rather than eye rolls. 67-year-old Linda Harrow had been a fixture in Millersburg for decades. As the former principal of Millersburg Elementary, she'd shaped 3 generations of local kids. Retirement had freed her to pursue her real passions, traveling to literary festivals, collecting rare books and mentoring young writers through the local library. Linda's Victorian house on Maple Avenue stood out with its carefully tended garden and walls lined floor to ceiling with books. Neighbors often saw her on the front porch with tea and a novel, her silver hair catching the afternoon sun. She was known for her quick wit and extensive vocabulary, the kind of woman who could quote Shakespeare during casual conversation without sounding pretentious. Linda had lived authentically as herself for over 4 decades. She'd transitioned in her 20s, building a respected career and earning the genuine affection of her community. To everyone in Millersburg, she was simply Linda, intelligent, independent, and refreshingly honest about everything except the most private details of her past. Their first interaction came through a heated debate about symbolism in The Great Gatsby. Linda's response to Darren's analysis was both challenging and encouraging, sparking a back-and-forth discussion that lasted hours. Soon, they were exchanging private messages, sharing favorite passages, and debating authors late into the night. Have you ever met someone online who seemed to understand you better than people in real life? For Darren, Linda represented something he'd never experienced. She didn't judge his quiet nature or find his literary interests boring. When he shared his thoughts on Hemingway's understated style, she responded with insights that made him see the work in entirely new ways. She encouraged his writing, celebrated his small victories at work, and listened when he needed to vent about his mother's constant questions about grandchildren. Linda found herself charmed by Darren's genuine curiosity and emotional intelligence. Unlike the men her age who dominated conversations with stories of their glory days, Darren asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to her answers. He appreciated her travel stories, her opinions on local politics, and her perspective on modern education. Their phone conversations began 6 months after they'd started messaging. Darren's voice was gentle, thoughtful, exactly what Linda had expected. Linda's laugh was infectious, her storytelling vivid enough to transport him to the cafes of Paris or the libraries of Prague she'd visited. When Darren finally worked up the courage to suggest meeting in person, Linda agreed immediately. Their first coffee date at Riverside Cafe lasted 4 hours, conversation flowing as naturally as it had online. The 37-year age gap raised eyebrows throughout the cafe, but neither seemed to notice the stares. What would you do if your family disapproved of someone you loved? Darren's parents expressed quiet concerns about the relationship. His mother worried about Linda's age, wondering aloud what a 67-year-old woman wanted with her son. His father questioned Linda's intentions, suggesting she might be looking for someone to take care of her as she aged. Darren dismissed their worries with surprising firmness. "She gets me in ways nobody ever has," he told them. "Age is just a number when you connect with someone's soul." If you are enjoying this content, like, subscribe, and share it with your loved ones to protect them from the same tragedy happening to them in the future. But beneath Linda's charming exterior lay a secret that would shatter everything Darren thought he knew about love. The Woodland Springs Inn sat nestled among Ohio's rolling hills, its wraparound porch and Victorian charm making it the perfect venue for intimate celebrations. On a crisp October morning, 32 guests gathered in the inn's garden pavilion to witness what many considered an unlikely union. Darren stood at the makeshift altar, fidgeting with his burgundy tie. His hands trembled slightly as he watched Linda walk down the petal-scattered aisle. She moved with surprising grace in her champagne-colored gown, the silk fabric catching the morning light. Her silver hair was elegantly swept up, adorned with small white roses that complemented her radiant smile. The photographer captured Darren's face the moment Linda reached him, pure joy mixed with nervous excitement. His eyes never left hers during the brief ceremony. When they exchanged vows, Linda's voice carried clearly across the small gathering, while Darren's words came in gentle whispers that made guests lean forward to hear. "I promise to love you exactly as you are," Darren said, his voice breaking slightly with emotion. Linda squeezed his hands. "And I promise to trust you with my whole heart." The kiss that sealed their marriage was tender, lasting just long enough to make Darren's mother dab her eyes despite her reservations. Have you ever been to a wedding where something felt off? The reception moved to the inn's dining room, where round tables held modest centerpieces of autumn leaves and candles. Linda worked the room like a seasoned politician, her warmth and intelligence quickly winning over skeptical relatives. She discussed football with Darren's uncle, shared travel stories with his cousin's wife, and even convinced his stern grandmother to laugh at her impression of a pompous literature professor. Darren's best man, his brother Mike, raised his glass first. "I haven't seen Darren this happy in years. Linda, whatever magic you've worked on my little brother, keep it up." The toast drew genuine applause, though Darren's parents managed only polite smiles. Linda's maid of honor, her longtime friend Margaret, spoke next. "Linda has always believed in second chances. At 67, she's proof that love doesn't follow any timeline. Here's to unexpected love and new beginnings." The couple's first dance was to "The Way You Look Tonight," Linda leading confidently while Darren followed, both laughing when he stepped on her dress. They talked animatedly about their honeymoon plans, a week in Charleston to visit historic libraries and literary landmarks. Do you believe in love at first sight, or does real love take time to build? As evening approached, guests began departing with warm hugs and promises to visit soon. Darren and Linda collected wedding cards and leftover cake, both glowing with contentment. The inn staff had prepared the honeymoon suite on the second floor, rose petals on the bed, chilled champagne on ice, and Linda's favorite white lilies arranged in crystal vases. Other guests retired to their rooms, exhausted from the day's celebration. The inn settled into peaceful quiet, only the occasional creak of old wood and distant laughter from the newlyweds breaking the silence. If you are enjoying this content, like, subscribe, and share it with your loved ones to protect them from the same tragedy happening to them in the future. As other guests drifted off to sleep, Darren and Linda were about to discover that some secrets are too big to survive a marriage. The honeymoon suite glowed softly in candlelight as Darren and Linda shared their first quiet moments as husband and wife. The champagne had left them both relaxed, their earlier nervousness replaced by the comfortable intimacy they'd built over months of late-night phone calls. Linda excused herself to the bathroom to change, leaving Darren alone with his thoughts. He couldn't believe his luck. After years of loneliness, he'd found someone who truly understood him. As he loosened his tie and sat on the edge of the bed, he felt more content, than he had in decades. When Linda emerged 20 minutes later, something had shifted. In the dim light as they drew closer together, Darren noticed details that hadn't been apparent before. The broader shoulders, the deeper voice when she whispered, subtle physical characteristics that suddenly didn't align with his expectations. His hands paused, confusion clouding his features. "Linda, there's something different." Linda froze, recognizing the change in his voice. After 4 decades of living as herself, she'd grown comfortable in her identity, but this moment, the moment she'd feared since their first date, had finally arrived. "Darren, let me explain," she said softly, moving to sit beside him on the bed. "There are things about my past—" "Your past?" Darren's voice cracked. He stood abruptly, running his hands through his hair. "What kind of past? What aren't you telling me?" Linda took a deep breath, her composure wavering for the first time all day. "I transitioned when I was young, Darren. I've been living as Linda for over 40 years. I hoped you knew, or at least suspected." The words hit Darren like a physical blow. He stared at her, his mind struggling to process the information. You were born male. How would you react if you discovered something life-changing about someone you loved?" "Biologically, yes, but Darren, I've been Linda longer than I was ever anything else. This is who I am. This is who you fell in love with." Darren's face went pale. He backed away from the bed, his breathing becoming shallow and rapid. "You lied to me. Our entire relationship. Was it all a lie?" "No." Linda stood, reaching toward him, but he flinched away. "I didn't lie about loving you, about who I am inside. I couldn't find the right moment to tell you about my medical history." "Medical history?" Darren's voice rose, the shock transforming into something darker. "This isn't medical history, Linda. This changes everything. Everything we've done, everything we've shared. Do you think people have the right to keep certain parts of their past private?" Linda tried to keep her voice steady, though tears were forming in her eyes. "Darren, please listen to me. I'm the same person who wrote you love letters, who stayed up all night talking about Steinbeck with you. Nothing about who I am has changed." But Darren was pacing now, his hands shaking. "Nothing's changed? How can you say that? We just got married. I made vows to someone I don't even know." "You do know me," Linda pleaded. "You know my heart, my dreams, my thoughts. Isn't that what matters?" "What's the difference between privacy and deception in a relationship?" Darren stopped pacing and turned to face her, his eyes wild with a mixture of confusion and growing rage. "Deception? You think this is just about privacy? I trusted you with everything. I defended you to my family, I planned a life with you, and now I find out you've been hiding this massive secret." Their voices were rising despite their efforts to keep quiet. In the room next door, an elderly couple stirred at the sound of heated discussion. Down the hall, a mother pulled her pillow over her head, hoping the argument would end soon. Linda realized the danger she was in, not just to her marriage, but to her safety. Darren's face had transformed from the gentle man she'd married into something she barely recognized. His jaw was clenched, his fists balled at his sides. "Darren, you're scaring me. Please, let's just talk about this calmly." But calm was no longer possible. The revelation had shattered something fundamental in Darren's mind, and Linda could see him retreating into a place where reason couldn't reach. If you are enjoying this content, like, subscribe, and share it with your loved ones, to protect them from the same tragedy happening to them in the future. What started as confused questions was about to explode into something far more dangerous. Darren's pacing grew more frantic as the reality of Linda's revelation consumed him. Every shared moment from the past year now felt contaminated by what he saw as deception. The poetry discussions, the intimate phone calls, the wedding vows, all of it replayed in his mind through this new devastating lens. "A year, Linda, a whole year of my life." His voice cracked with raw emotion. "I told you things I'd never told anyone. I brought you home to meet my parents. I married you." Linda remained seated on the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to stop them from shaking. "Darren, please, I know this is shocking, but I'm still the same person who loves you, the same person you said understood your soul." "Don't you dare!" Darren whirled around, his finger pointing accusingly. "Don't you dare use my own words against me. You manipulated me. You let me fall in love with a lie. Have you ever been so angry that you scared yourself?" The couple in the adjacent room, the Hendersons, were now fully awake. Martha Henderson pressed her ear against the thin wall, whispering to her husband that they should call the front desk. The argument had moved beyond normal newlywed tensions into something that made her deeply uncomfortable. Linda stood slowly, her voice growing desperate. "Darren, I understand you're hurt, but you're not thinking clearly. We can work through this. People do it all the time when they discover unexpected things about their partners." "Unexpected things?" Darren's laugh was hollow, frightening. "Unexpected things are finding out your wife doesn't like horror movies or that she voted for the other candidate. This is fraud, Linda. You committed fraud against me." The word fraud seemed to trigger something in Darren's mind. His face contorted with a rage that Linda had never seen before, not in their year together, not even in his stories about his ex-girlfriend. This was primal, dangerous anger that made her instinctively back toward the bathroom door. "I gave you everything," Darren continued, his voice now loud enough that other guests down the hall could hear clearly. "I defended you when my mother said you were too old. I told my brother you were the love of my life, and this whole time you knew this would destroy me." Linda's voice broke as tears streamed down her face. "I didn't want to lose you. I thought if you got to know the real me first—" "The real you?" Darren's shout made Linda flinch. "I don't even know what that means anymore. Who are you really, Linda? What else have you been hiding?" 2 rooms down, a young father stepped into the hallway, debating whether to intervene. The shouting had woken his toddler, and his wife was holding their crying child, both of them frightened by the intensity of the voices. Linda tried one last time to reach him. "Darren, I'm begging you. Don't let this moment destroy what we have. We love each other. That has to count for something." But Darren was beyond hearing her. The psychological break that prosecutors would later describe to the jury was happening in real time. His carefully constructed world, built on trust, honesty, and the belief that he'd finally found his soulmate, had crumbled completely. "Do you think there's ever a justification for violence, no matter how betrayed someone feels?" "Love?" His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You don't know what love is. Love is honesty. Love is trust. Love isn't lying to someone for an entire year about who you really are." That's when Darren's gaze fell on the heavy brass bedside lamp. In his fractured mental state, it represented something, a solution, an ending to the unbearable pain of betrayal that was consuming him. Linda saw his eyes shift and knew immediately that she was in mortal danger. "Darren, no, please think about what you're doing." But rational thought had abandoned him. Darren grabbed the lamp, its cord yanking from the wall with a sharp pop. Linda screamed, a sound so piercing that every guest on the 2nd floor would later describe it to police. The heavy thud that followed was sickeningly final. Then came the silence, sudden, complete, and absolutely terrifying to everyone who heard it. Down the hall, the young father was already dialing 911. The Hendersons clutched each other in their bed, afraid to move. The inn's night manager, alerted by multiple frantic calls from guests, was running up the stairs. Inside the honeymoon suite, Darren sat on the carpet in complete shock, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. The lamp lay beside Linda's motionless form, its brass base stained with blood. "She lied to me," he muttered, his voice hollow and childlike. "She lied to me. She lied." What could have prevented this tragedy from happening? Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. If you made it to this point, drop a comment with "I'm still here, let's see who is still watching." By morning, a love story had become a murder case that would divide a community. By 6:30 a.m., Woodland Springs Inn manager Patricia Wells had used her master key to enter the honeymoon suite after guests reported hours of silence following the disturbance. What she found would haunt her for years. Linda's body sprawled beside the bed, the brass lamp discarded nearby, and Darren sitting motionless against the wall, staring at nothing. "Ma'am, you need to step back," Officer Kevin Torres told Wells as she stood frozen in the doorway. Torres, a 10-year veteran of the Holmes County Sheriff's Department, had seen domestic violence cases before, but never anything quite like this. The scene told its story clearly. A marriage that had lasted less than 24 hours, ending in unthinkable violence. Darren offered no resistance when Torres approached. "She lied to me," he repeated mechanically as the handcuffs clicked into place. "She lied about everything." Detective Sarah Martinez arrived within the hour, leading the crime scene investigation. The evidence was overwhelming. Darren's fingerprints on the lamp, blood spatter consistent with a violent attack, and multiple witness accounts of the escalating argument. When Martinez read Darren his rights at the station, he immediately confessed. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he told investigators through tears. "But she wasn't who she said she was. Our whole marriage was built on a lie." News of the killing spread through Millersburg like wildfire. By noon, local TV crews had set up outside the inn, and by evening, national networks were broadcasting the story across America. "Newlywed kills bride after discovering secret" dominated headlines for weeks. The revelation about Linda's transgender identity divided the small community. At Morrison's Diner, longtime residents debated whether she had an obligation to tell Darren before marriage. Some defended her right to privacy after 4 decades of living authentically. Others argued that such a significant detail should have been disclosed before wedding vows. "I known Linda for 30 years, said retired teacher Dorothy Franklin. "She was the same caring, intelligent woman every day. That boy had no right to hurt her, no matter what he learned." But others disagreed. "If that was my son, I'd want to know who he was really marrying," countered local mechanic Bill Stevens. "That's not the kind of secret you keep from someone you love." The case attracted national attention, partly because it highlighted complex questions about transgender rights, disclosure in relationships, and the boundaries of privacy versus honesty in marriage. Prosecutor Jennifer Walsh charged Darren with second-degree murder, arguing that his violent response demonstrated extreme recklessness and disregard for human life. The defendant had numerous options when he learned this information, Walsh told the jury during opening statements. He could have left the room, filed for divorce, or simply talked through his feelings. Instead, he chose violence. Defense attorney Michael Chen painted a different narrative. "My client suffered a complete psychological breakdown when his world collapsed in a single moment. This wasn't premeditated murder, it was a tragic reaction to devastating news that shattered his reality." Chen argued for voluntary manslaughter, claiming Darren acted in the heat of passion after adequate provocation. The defense brought in psychiatrists who testified about the psychological trauma of discovering such significant information about a spouse. "Do you think Darren's sentence should be more or less severe given the circumstances?" The trial lasted 6 weeks, with the small courthouse packed daily. Local residents followed every development, their opinions sharply divided. Some viewed Darren as a victim of deception who deserved compassion. Others saw him as a cold-blooded killer who murdered an innocent woman. The central question haunted everyone involved. Did Linda have a moral or legal duty to disclose her transgender status before marriage? Legal experts debated whether non-disclosure constituted fraud, while LGBTQ advocates argued that transgender people shouldn't face violence regardless of when they choose to share personal medical history. How do you think this case would be handled differently today versus when it happened? The case forced uncomfortable conversations about acceptance, identity, and the fine line between privacy and deception in intimate relationships. If you are enjoying this content, like, subscribe, and share it with your loved ones to protect them from the same tragedy happening to them in the future. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. Darren Whitfield was sentenced to 18 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 12. As the gavel fell, Linda's sister Margaret wept quietly in the front row, while Darren's parents sat stone-faced, struggling to reconcile their son's actions with the gentle man they'd raised. The sentencing judge, Patricia Hawkins, addressed both families before announcing the punishment. This case represents a tragic failure of communication, understanding, and ultimately, human decency. While we can acknowledge the defendant's psychological distress, nothing justifies the taking of another person's life. Darren's mother, Catherine, spoke to reporters outside the courthouse. "We failed him somehow. We should have taught him better ways to handle shock and disappointment. Linda didn't deserve what happened to her, and now 2 families are destroyed." Margaret Harrow, Linda's longtime friend and chosen family, established a scholarship in Linda's name at the local library for LGBTQ youth seeking higher education. "Linda lived 47 years as her authentic self," Margaret said at the memorial service. "She touched hundreds of lives as a teacher and friend. That's the legacy we should remember." The case forced Millersburg to confront uncomfortable truths about acceptance and violence. Pastor David Chen at First Methodist organized community healing circles, bringing together residents with opposing views about the tragedy. "We can disagree about disclosure and relationships while still agreeing that violence is never the answer," he told congregants. The broader implications extended far beyond Ohio's borders. Legal scholars debated whether non-disclosure laws needed updating for modern relationships. LGBTQ advocacy groups used the case to highlight the ongoing dangers transgender individuals face, even in seemingly safe situations. Relationship counselors began incorporating discussions about difficult disclosures into their marriage preparation programs. What do you think this case teaches us about love, trust, and acceptance? Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a psychologist specializing in relationship dynamics, analyzed the case for national media. This tragedy illustrates how poor emotional regulation can turn personal pain into devastating violence. Healthy relationships require tools for processing difficult information, not destructive reactions. The waste of human potential haunts everyone touched by this story. Linda Harrow spent 4 decades building a respected life, contributing to her community as an educator and mentor. Her authentic journey from her 20s forward represented courage and self-determination. All of that ended in a moment of rage that solved nothing and destroyed everything. Darren's future, once filled with the promise of love and partnership, now consists of prison walls and the weight of irreversible actions. His family carries the double burden of grief, mourning Linda's death while grappling with their son's transformation from gentle introvert to convicted killer. The ripple effects continue years later. The Woodland Springs Inn closed permanently, unable to recover from the negative publicity. Several marriages in Millersburg sought counseling as couples questioned how well they truly knew each other. The case became required reading in criminal justice and sociology courses, a case study in how quickly love can turn deadly. How can we better support people dealing with identity and relationship challenges? Perhaps the most important lesson from this tragedy is that difficult conversations, while uncomfortable, are always preferable to violence. Communication, even when it's painful, offers hope for understanding. Violence offers only destruction, leaving nothing but questions about what might have been if 2 people had found better ways to handle truth, disappointment, and the complexities of human connection. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, but please keep the discussion respectful. Before you go, if you want to learn how to protect yourself from potential danger, then don't forget to download your free ebook titled Safety for Women Over 40 Everyday Habits to Outsmart Criminals by clicking the link in the pinned comment.